Well, hello everyone. Welcome. I wanted to start out with a story about Chicago, and I had the pleasure of going to Chicago about 3 or 4 weeks ago. As I know it was the first weekend, or pardon me, the first week of November. And after talking with Dana, my wife, and going back and forth, we were deciding, does it make sense now with COVID to go up or not go up? And I said, I haven't seen clients up there in, since January. January was the last time I was in Chicago, and I haven't seen my folks since January. And my dad was having some minor back surgery, if there is something minor. And so we weighed the odds and we went through the whole wear the mask thing and stay away from people and social distance. And I said, baby, I got to go. I got to try. So it was a Monday. I said, I'm not going to fly. So I didn't fly yet. So I drove up on a Monday, and the plan was to stay until Thursday. And so I had appointments set up for Tuesday and Wednesday. So I get in the car on Monday, I make the 8-hour drive, hit there Monday night, and my brother and sister still live there. So I have a brother and sister in Chicago, and I have another sister still in Texas, in Dallas. And so she wasn't there, but I get there and my brother and sister weren't there. And that was the first time that I ever arrived in Chicago and my brother and sister weren't there, or that they weren't coming over for dinner. And so it was kind of unique just to sit and chat with my mom and dad. And as the week went on, it just got, the only word I can think of is special. Because that night it was fine. We had a nice dinner. It was good. The next day I got up and I went to the first appointment. And I go to my first appointment. And this is where the past 9 months of COVID sat on my chest and my head. And I said, I went and visited this client. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I can't stay. I mean, I was there for about 20 minutes and I said, I've got to get out of here. I just went into this slight panic mode, so much so she texted me about a week later and she's like, you all right? I just wanted to check in on you. And I said, yeah, I'm fine. It was just the weight of all that was going on. And I said, it doesn't make sense for us to do this. I said, we can do this over the phone. We can do it through Zoom. So I ended up changing the rest of the appointments and just hanging out at the house. So I hung out, finished the rest of the appointments, throughout the week. But during this time, I really got to spend a lot of time with my parents. My parents are 82 and 81. And I thought about it. I hadn't probably been alone with my parents in 40 years because there was always somebody in the house. But what was interesting, at least it was interesting or unique to me, is that as the week progressed, then I turned into this different Johnny, right? I turned into the Johnny that lives in Nashville and comes home to Chicago, looks around and sees everything that needs to be fixed. Well, first I stopped and pardon my French, I bitched about my brother and sister. I'm like, where are they? What are they doing? Why aren't they cleaning this up? What happened to the cabinets? So I go through this whole litany of stuff. I'm out there blowing leaves. I walk by, they've got a TV in the basement. So I stay in the basement and you go downstairs in this TV and the TV is one of those, and I think we all have one. It's about 50 years old and weighs 900 pounds. And my dad said, how was the TV last night? I said, well, the picture was great, but I couldn't hear a thing. So I ended up getting a new TV. I get a new TV, I bring it in, and they're like, well, this is nicer than the one that's upstairs. Can you bring the one upstairs downstairs? And I'm like, of course. So I brought the one downstairs. But I think the icing on the cake for me was when my mom said, Johnny, we got to flip the mattress. And I said, flip the mattress? Okay, I'll flip it with you. So we go in there and we flip the mattress. And I said, Mom, as long as the mattress is flipped, why don't you pull off the mattress pad and throw it in the wash? She goes, you wash your mattress pad? I said, Ma, yes, you wash your mattress pad. So that turned her into looking at and talking with everyone she knows if they wash their mattress pad or not. So we get the mattress pad washed, flip the bed back over, put it back on. And then about an hour later, she goes, well, the sheets are ready. I said, awesome. I said, I'll make the bed for you. She goes, no, I'll make it. I said, no, Mom, I'll make it for you. She goes, no, then you have to walk around the bed yourself. And I said, okay. I said, I do that sometimes at home. Sometimes Dana helps me, sometimes you help me. And she goes, well, no, I don't want you to walk around the bed by yourself. She said, I'll come help you. And I said, okay. So here I am with my 81-year-old mother making the bed. And I have not done that in about 45, 50 years either, right? All this to say, I sat down that night and I was supposed to go home Thursday. Dad had some minor surgery on Thursday. I was supposed to go home Thursday afternoon. I thought I'll drive back down after he gets out. They ended up keeping him overnight. And so he is fine. But when I called Dana, she's like, how many times has your mom stayed in that house by herself? And I said, I think twice. I'll ask her. So I asked her 2 times. She has never stayed in that house by herself. 50 years of marriage, more than that. They're closer to 60 or 70. She has never been in that house by herself. So I said, I got to stay. She goes, stay. And then my dad stayed overnight in the hospital. So he didn't come home until Friday night. And then I stayed Saturday to make sure she was comfortable. And then I stayed through Sunday. And I bring this up because it was probably one of the nicest weeks that I have spent with my family in, again, 40 years, because there was no rushing. There wasn't interruption. I did go see my brother and sister, but nobody else came over. We just cooked dinner. We made pies. We laughed. We did yard work. We cleaned up the kitchen cabinets. We got a new coffee pot. I got rid of the 900-pound TV, and just had a good time. And so for the first time, I sat back and I said, and there was almost a tear that came to my eye, and I got really emotional. And I was like, I am so fortunate to be able to do this. So the planning and the steps and the work and the effort that we've put in, that I've put in, is paying off. Because now I could stay there. I didn't have to worry about coming home. I didn't have to worry about getting back to work. I didn't have to worry about, what's going to happen in the office. It was a great time just with my family. Now, yours may not be the same. You might not have the same story. But my wish for all of you is to get to the point where you set up your plans and you set up your retirement planning where you can choose what you want to do. It might be for you traveling. It might be going to the kids' baseball games. It might be volunteering, whatever it is to you. My goal for you is to set this up to where you can run your life and make the choices and decisions you want that are important to you. So with that, let's get started and see if I can shed some wisdom on a couple of things. I do have Mr. Joel Van Belkom with me. He's sitting.
Hello.
He's sitting in the corner over there. So we're learning Zoom and getting used to this. There is a chat feature. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to use it. I think under your section there, you should see a chat box, and I'm going to type in hello. I'm going to put this in here just in case you have any questions. So if you see that, great. I'll check it from time to time, but just let me know if you have any thoughts or questions. So let's get started. So we're here today to talk about de-risking your retirement. What are the steps that we can take to make sure that you can de-risk your retirement and get to the point where you feel comfortable spending your time and your resources doing what you love to do? So imagine that day. There's no risk. Everything is set up. You're doing what you love to do all day long. I got to leave this up a little bit longer. So this is the disclosure. I probably shouldn't make fun of it just in case compliance comes along and says, hey, you're supposed to leave that up longer. So please don't do anything that I suggest without talking to us. How about that? No, I'm really in trouble. All right, 3 areas of risk. So the first one would be, do I have enough income? So how am I going to figure out if I have enough income, what's going to come in? So we got to figure out what the deficit is, right? So you're going to have some stuff that comes in steady. You're going to have some stuff that, maybe you're working part-time. There's going to be a gap more than likely. We've got to figure out how much or what that gap might be. Second thing we have to look at is making sure that the risk of the market and the economy doesn't hit us. So we have been on a 10-year, longer than that. And Joel's going to talk to us about the stock market and some of the risk that's involved in the stock market. But we definitely have to be aware of it. And the market's going to turn one day. Wall Street is still running, and it's running like crazy and doing great. One of these days it will turn. So we want to make sure we have enough money protected so that the impacts of the market don't derail our portfolio. And then the third thing we have to look at is what's going to happen when we talk about taxes. So with all the different taxes that are out there, we've got surplus packages that are still coming. I saw a headline that they're talking about that should be hopefully out here in the future, the second one. Our debt is rising, which means that someday we're going to pay tax on all this. So it's going to come back to us and we're going to have to pay tax on this. How do you not pay more than your fair share? All right. So the three-legged stool that was. So this is a great example of my folks. My dad was a teacher. My mom worked part-time in the hospital. There were 4 kids. There wasn't a lot of extra money. Our vacations we were camping, and I still love camping to this day. But my dad has a 3-legged stool because he worked as a teacher. He was in Arlington Heights, Illinois. He worked as a teacher, and he's got a very, very nice pension. I can't believe the pension that he has. So he does have a pension of about, $80,000. The second part was that when my dad came back after teaching, he had a part-time job. So he would come home, during the school year. Oftentimes he would still do some stuff in the evenings, but definitely every summer he was doing something. So during that time, he got to accumulate Social Security, and then they had their personal savings. Well, now if we start to look though, so my mom and dad are doing okay because of the pension and the Social Security, but really what's happening to us is our 3-legged stool used to be all 3 of those things. We're down basically to Social Security, which again, with the taxes the way they are and where we're looking, may or may not be as strong as it was in the past, and our personal savings. So what's happening now is the burden is getting placed upon us to make sure we're putting aside the money. The other thing is my parents and your parents, they didn't have to do retirement planning, right? Because if they had a pension of coming in that was $80,000, he's got Social Security. And by the way, if you meet my folks, don't mention that. I probably wasn't supposed to say that. So we have pension, Social Security, and then their personal savings. Well, a lot of us don't have a pension anymore because we're back to the 401k, Social Security, and we're left with our personal savings. So it's getting a little bit tougher. Now, if you're like me, you have a junk drawer. And my junk drawer, Joel has one. My junk drawer sits underneath the coffee pot in the kitchen. There's one section and there's 2 drawers there. So I am an overachiever. Not only do I have one junk drawer, I have 2. So, but in there is very similar to yours. It's just a collection of stuff that has no place to go that we might need someday. I put this picture up because a lot of folks that come in and sit down with Joel and I, they have this junk drawer, but it's their finances. So what happens is they bring in this hodgepodge mixture of different things, different investments, different tools, and they're not working together. So it's not efficient. You've got one that's supposed to be doing this, one that's supposed to be doing that, but really what's happening is they're all not gelling, just like a junk drawer. So one of our goals for you is to take that junk drawer and see if we can't organize it a little bit more for you. And we do that through something called, we call it our retirement analyzer. But it is a tool that we use where we can take all of the assets that you have, match them up with what your goals might be, match that up with your income deficit, and really sit down and go, here's what your future might look like. So now you can imagine a day where this is all organized. Your junk drawer is organized, your finances are in order, you have a steady stream of income coming in, you have other money in other buckets that are serving other purposes, meaning short-term, long-term. We've also got a cash bucket. Now you're free to do what you want. And peace of mind comes into play. Because I can imagine if that is done, it's very, very peaceful. And the process doesn't take long, folks. We can do this. I mean, it's going to take 6 weeks of your life probably, but we can do this for you. We've done it for hundreds and thousands of people throughout the country. We can do it for you. All right. So what about this 4% withdrawal rate? Some of us out there have heard and seen that there is the safe withdrawal rate's about 4%. Well, I'm here to tell you, little secret, 4% is not 4%. The actual number, if we're looking at what we should look to withdraw off the portfolio, is probably closer to 2 or 3%. Actually, Morningstar, this one's quoted from the USA Today, but Morningstar also came out and said the number should be closer to 2.7%. So what does that mean? That means if we're sitting on $1 million portfolio and we are either going to get 2% or 3%, we can start to look and go, well, how much revenue or income is that going to generate? Well, it's going to generate either $20,000 or $30,000. What does that translate to? Not very exciting. So we need to look for ways, and we can do it. Look for ways that you still can have safe money, but you can get a little bit higher return. It's not in the bank. It could be in the insurance world. It could be in the Wall Street world. And one of the things that I want to mention is that Joel and I operate in all 3 worlds. And what that means is that If you came in and sat down and wanted to do something strictly with bank type products, you can do that. If you wanted to come in and sit down and talk about insurance type products, we can do that. If you came in and sat down and said, hey, I want to talk about Wall Street products, we can do that as well. So none of our plans are the same. And again, very critical to look and go, how can we get the most money out of our investments without taking on unnecessary risk? But we want to see if we can get away from the 2 or 3%, because if we live around 2%, you're going to need more money to retire. Whereas if we can increase that number to 4 or 5%, well, now you've got $40,000 or $50,000 and you may have plenty of money. The other thing I want to mention here is that you don't have to have $1 million. Okay. You might need $5 million. I'm not sure what your expenses are like. I'm not sure what your lifestyle is like or what you're living like. But I do know this, that it's an income issue. So we've got to find ways to solve the income problem so that you can sustain your income throughout your life to live the life that you want to live. All right. Let's talk about risk, but I'm not going to talk about it. Joel's going to talk about it. So Joel, what kind of insight can you share with us about risk?
Let's talk about it. Well, first and foremost, happy holidays, everybody. My name's Joel. I'm a financial advisor here at the Navin Group. And second topic that we're going to be talking about here is risk. Really just keeping your assets protected, even if the market drops. And if you're anything like me, if you watch the news, one of the words I keep hearing over and over is the word volatility. And that's because we live in volatile, crazy times. Whether we're talking about world affairs, domestic politics, or even people's reactions to social media posts, we're in the middle of some of the most turbulent times many of us have ever seen. But what does that really mean? It simply means that with so many things happening so fast, the stock market can also go up and down just as quickly. And what does that mean for you? Well, one of the questions that many of our clients ask us is, Joel, will a major drop in the market change the hopes and dreams that I have for retirement? And that, my friends, is a very good question. So let's talk just for a moment about two things. One being risk tolerance, and then number two, what I call the danger zone. And to illustrate this, I just want to tell you a quick story about two clients of ours that I think you may be able to relate to as well. And for our purposes, let's just call this couple Tom and Eileen. So basically, Tom and Eileen, they came out to one of our in-person seminars. And at the end of the seminar, Eileen was kind of nudging Tom about signing up. And, truth be told, I'm not sure he really wanted to come in and see us. But I learned long ago not to underestimate the power of a woman. So as predicted, 3 days later, they were sitting in my office, in our office. They had about $700,000 saved for retirement. That was spread between 401ks, IRAs, savings accounts. And as we sat there drinking coffee, we talked about their grandchildren, and we talked about the dreams of them wanting to spend time with their grandchildren after Tom retired. Then I started to ask a more difficult question. And I asked, so given those goals, how much of your money are you comfortable having at risk in the market? Now, folks, Tom is 64 and Eileen is 63. They were actually college sweethearts, and they were fun to watch as we sat there because she would always let him answer first and then correct him. I seem to have similar in my personal life as well. Tom was hoping to retire in the next year or so, and he was actually the first to answer. How much would we risk? And he said, oh, I don't know, maybe 10%. Eileen literally put her hand over his mouth and smiled. What he meant to say, she corrected him, was $10. And that, folks, is what we would call a conservative investor. So I kind of chuckled, laughed, and asked if they'd be comfortable with having me run an analysis of their current portfolio they had. They worked with an existing advisor, and we just wanted to see where they currently stood and what they stand to lose in the event of any major big market downturn or correction. So here's why I asked that question. And a lot of you here tonight, you might already know this, but does anyone know what March 9th of 2019 marked? And I'll pause for a second if anybody wants to chat and take a stab at it. That date actually marked the 10-year anniversary of one of the longest bull markets in history. And if you don't mind, let me take a little closer look here at the history of the S&P 500. So we all know that a bull market is when the market is on the rise. A bear market is when things are on the decline. And many of you know that a correction is a drop of a 10% or more in the market following a previous upswing. But does everyone here understand that rises, falls, and corrections in the market are absolutely cyclical? And what I mean by that is that they're not predictable down to the specific date on which they're going to occur, or else, honestly, we'd all be rich. But the cycle of them happening is absolutely predictable. And in fact, if we go back almost 100 years, back to 1926, and look what happened, you actually see a significant rise is always followed by a correction and then a period of decline. Does everybody remember kind of the dot-com years from 95 to 2001? For anyone wondering, yes, I was alive during that time. I was actually graduating high school around that time. Anyway, the internet was exploding. There was all sorts of startup tech companies and software companies were erupting, and the market was just really on a tear. And the predictable correction followed with 2.1 years of a downward bear market. This cycle itself is 100% predictable. In fact, we know that the average market run-up or bull market lasts 4.5 years, and the average market decline or bear market lasts 1.4. So this is really why I was so interested in how much Tom and Eileen would be comfortable having at risk in the market, because we've all been in a rising bull market for over a decade. And what does that virtually guarantee us will come at some point, you might ask? You're exactly right, a correction. And when, not if, that happens, I never want any of our clients sitting in retirement and being overexposed to those losses. So Tom and Eileen, they both agreed it would make sense for us to take a closer look at their current position, and we just ran an analysis for them, which is already a part of our step-by-step process here at the Navin Group. When they came back in a week later, we sat down again over some coffee. I shared with them some good news. Their portfolio had actually had some really good returns over the past 10 years. They generally performed really well. Of course, I had to be honest, though, because we were in a decade where the S&P itself had annualized about a 10.75% return. So hopefully everyone's portfolios performed pretty well during that time. But that said, I also had to share some other news. I had to let Tom and Eileen know that if the stock market dropped again, like it did in 2008, they would stand to lose. It was nearly 40% of their retirement savings. And that's simply because of how their retirement assets were currently allocated and how they were exposed to risk. So that means instead of going from 700,000 down to 630,000, like Tom had said he would have been comfortable with in a 10% drop, they would have plummeted from 700,000 all the way down to 420,000. That's a $280,000 drop. And in their case, that was more than twice of what they were both earning on an annual basis as a couple. Crazy. But, as conservative investors, their risk tolerance did not at all match up with their actual portfolio. And can I be completely candid with you? We see this all the time. And one of the services that we offer here at the Navin Group, anybody that comes into our office for a visit, is the same analysis on your current portfolio. So I can't tell you how many clients we have been really blown away by how much risk they were taking on versus how much risk they thought they were taking on. So let me move on to the next slide here. So next, just one other kind of variable that people overlook when planning for retirement. Wanted to take a look at just the two fictitious brothers. Let's call them Steve and Bill. So Steve here on the left, he worked in the consulting business for most of his life. His brother Bill here on the right, he was a small business owner. Let's say that at retirement, both of them had the exact same amount in an IRA, and they were both planning on using that money for income. So they both had $500,000 and they both plan to use 30,000 of that IRA each year for income to cover their living expenses. The only difference between was when they decided to retire. So Steve decided to give up consulting in 1990, and Bill decided to step away from his business 10 years later in 2000. They had the exact same IRA balance and the exact same financial goals for their IRAs. But let's take a closer look at what happened in this example here. Can everybody see that okay? I guess only John can answer.
Looks good from here, Joel.
All right, perfect. Well, if you look at the final IRA account balances, you see that Steve has over 1.2 million in his IRA after 10 years of taking $30,000 of income, while his brother Bill on the right, only $156,000 left. And you might ask, how can that be? The difference in the results is something called the sequence of returns. And I don't love industry jargon, but this is one that's good to pay attention to. In retirement, it can be devastating to your portfolio. If you look at the difference in the order or sequence of the returns between the two brothers, you see that Steve's first decade in retirement was a really great one in the market. Bill's, on the other hand, on the right, not so good. Some big downward turns, and while they both started off with the same exact amount, after 10 years, Bill was left with less than 13% of what his brother's account balance was. So each of you here tonight, you're going to have different circumstances. We're all going to have different circumstances, but this simple hypothetical example, it does highlight the importance of two things. First, you want to make sure that you're not overexposed to the market risk too late in life. And then second, making sure, as we said before, that you have a guaranteed plan for lifetime income so that you never are in a position like Bill here. You don't want to be realizing that you have a lot of life left, but not so much of an account balance. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, yeah, Joel, but if I take my money out of the market, won't I be missing out on some of the gains if the markets go up? And then others here might be worried because you might feel like you're behind and you feel like you need to take on more risk because you have to catch up. And I totally get that too. We even get asked all the time if there's a way to participate in some of the growth of the market, but without any of the downside market risk. And that's a really good question. What if there was a way to grow your money in the market when it goes up, but then not lose your money if the market goes down? And believe it or not, did you know that something like that actually exists? There are actual opportunities like that available, but just like anything else, not every opportunity is the right for every person. And that's why it's so important that you have a custom tailored plan, not just a portfolio. And in retirement, volatility is not our friend. You see, in most areas of our financial lives, we get second chances. Say you're in your 40s and invest a little bit in some stock that doesn't perform, not the end of the world, right? You move on. Let's say that you have a down year in your early 50s inside your 401k. It happens, right? It's the long game, as they say. Hopefully next year will be better, but we have to remember, how many times do most people retire? And I know mine's only once. So ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we do not get a do-over on that one. But that's why it's all the more critical to have a plan, not just a portfolio or kind of that junk drawer full of investments and products that John was kind of relating to earlier. It's also why it's important that you have a plan, and that plan needs to be adjusted over time. So here is the deal. As you get closer to retirement, less and less of your money should be at risk. Because you don't have as much time to recover if the market should drop. When you had 35 or 40 years to bounce back from losses, it wasn't a big deal. But as you do get closer, the approach you take needs to change along with that as well. That's why we call the last 10 years before you plan to retire the retirement danger zone. If you're within 10 years of retiring and you're still investing the same way that you were when you were younger, you might be at risk. And if the stock market had a major drop, it could significantly impact and affect the options that you have in retirement. So there's really just too much at stake when it all comes down to it, that close to retirement. And it's important that each of you here tonight be using different strategies to help prepare for that. And so now let's transition to the third and final risk for tonight, which is the damaging impact of taxes. And yeah, appreciate the time, everybody. And I'll turn it back over to the one and only Mr. John Navin.
I don't think it's necessary. You keep going. No, I'm just kidding. That was good. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
I'm going to mention something else in the danger zone. And folks, we probably got about 10, 15 minutes. So we're not going to talk very much longer. We wanted to give you enough information, to get your whistle wetted, if you will. You can't solve everyone's issues or problems in a 45-minute webinar. It's going to take a little bit more than that. And but I want to touch on real quick, because you mentioned the danger zone. And there is also another unique opportunity in that danger zone. That is also the zone. It used to be from 59 to 70. Well, now it's 59 to 72. So they changed the year in which you take retired minimum distributions. So that danger zone area is also the benefit zone. So if you're between 60 and 72, this is the only year that you have control over your IRA in whether you take distributions or you don't take distributions. Because prior to 59 and a half, you get a 10% penalty if you pull out early, right? After 72, we got to start taking required minimum distributions. So the government tells us on both sides what we can and what we can't do. In this middle part, you've got flexibility and we can make some decisions. And I'm going to say and venture out, you heard me touch on it a little bit earlier about taxes. Taxes are going up. There is no way that they're going to get around it. I did see a funny meme today. Joe Biden is now the president for the 73rd time. So he's finally elected. He's coming in, and I'm going to tell you taxes are going up. So I shouldn't sound so promissory, but I feel very strongly that taxes are probably going to go up. And really, if it wasn't Biden, it was going to be Trump. He's going to have to tackle these taxes at some point. So again, I'm not opposed to paying my fair share. I'm not opposed to you paying your fair share. But we can get clients with proper planning. We can get them down into a 12, 15% tax bracket often. And these are folks that have money. So it's just creative ways that you can manipulate or change. Manipulate sounds like a scary word, and it's not. But ways that we can change distributions from our accounts, ways that we change which accounts we pull from, a few different ways. So let's see, my turn to get going here. If I click the right buttons, like for example, here is another something to think about. So how does saving $155,000 in tax, or $155,000 saving tax on $155,000 of income lead to paying over $1 million? And I'm going to mention this, and I want to show you this illustration for a couple of reasons, but let me show it to you first. And it looks like this. And again, this might be tough to see, but in essence, what we were always taught, right? What do the experts tell us? Put your money aside. If you got the 401k, you want to put money in the 401k and max it out as much as you possibly can. That's what the experts tell you. I'm going to let you in a little secret. That may not be the best advice. Okay. You might be deferring it to a higher tax bracket. So we want to look at how much you're putting in there and how much it's going to grow to in the future, just like this here. So here's a gentleman or a lady that put aside, on the left-hand side, a 35-year-old, we'll make her a woman, a 35-year-old woman, put away, $5,000 each year. So good for her, saving the money. And that is awesome. So you want to make sure you save that. She had an earnings rate of about 7%. So the earnings each year were on this particular amount was $175. So her ending balance was $5,175. She did that for the next 30 years. So she put away 30,000 times 5,000, $155,000. So if you watch the math and you watch the grid and the chart there, you'll see her ending balance was 528,000. Well, all we did is we took the 528,000 now that she's age 66. And again, this is before they changed the RMD rule to age 72. That just happened this year, folks, where they changed the RMD rule. So let me pause for a second, just so you know. Something called the Secure Act. I'm going to throw this out. It's going to take about 30 seconds. Secure Act came out this year. A couple things that are big that apply to most people. One, you can no longer deduct your home equity loans. So we want to look for different ways if we're going to borrow money or have home equity loans to make it tax efficient, because the home equity write-off is gone. The second thing that happened is they changed the required minimum distribution age from 70 until you reach age 72. So they're letting you defer your money even longer. Well, we think the government's being nice, right? Maybe, maybe not, because let's go down and look at our example here and I'll come back full circle. So age 66, our young lady here has 528,000. Doesn't have to start taking distributions until age 70. Watch her pull out at age 70. She's pulling out withdrawals, 23,000, 24,000, 25,000, et cetera, all the way through. So she pulls out $529,000 in withdrawals. Then she still has $632,000 left. When you pass away, the money goes from you to your spouse if you are married. After that, it probably goes to your church, charity, children, whichever is most important to you. That being said, I have heard when people are doing these elections and making promises that no one above 400,000, 250,000 is going to get an increase in their taxes. Let me share this with you. When you pass away and it goes to your spouse lives on that money and she'll take some money off of this. From there, it goes to your child, let's say. If your child inherits $632,000 in a particular year that has not been taxed because your IRAs have not been taxed yet, that all becomes taxable income to that child. That child might make $75,000 a year right now, but when they inherit $632,000 of your money added to their $75,000, what's their tax bracket? It's the highest one. Okay, so they're in the highest tax bracket. You've deferred that money to the highest tax bracket possible. Another little secret no one tells you about. We know that joint taxes, so if you're married, the joint tax rate is less than the single tax rate. Is anybody here going to get out alive? Not yet, not that I know of. Maybe Elon Musk will think of something and now we can get out of here alive, or somebody else genius will. But we can't, right? So we're all going to die. When we become single, we go to a higher tax bracket. So when this woman's husband passes away, it goes from a joint tax bracket to a single tax bracket. So just in this one example, you can see 3 or 4 different ways that you're going to get clobbered in taxes if you don't take the right steps and do the right planning. So keep that thought in mind. I like this topic, so I'm happy to talk more about it, but I'll move on just for time's sake and so that we're not sitting here too much longer. And I appreciate your patience, folks. I know it's tough to watch and listen, but so when you visit us or get together with us, and we aren't doing in-person meetings anymore, we're going to wait until it kind of settles down. So we're still doing everything by Zoom, and we're discovering it can be effective and it can work just as well by Zoom as it does in person. We miss the in-person because I miss the hugs, right? I'm kind of a hugger and I like to hug people. So I miss that part of it. But when you come together, we can look at not only your taxes, we look at your retirement analyzer, we look at your investments, we look at your income plan. And we'll look at writing a written income plan for you, all the same stuff I just said, risk tolerance versus your portfolio. And then what are some of the ways that we can reduce your taxes? So aside from just the stuff that we shared with you this evening, there are more ways that we didn't share that you can do and prepare not only your income plan, but your risk tolerance and also some tax reduction stuff. So that being said, 3 important things that we need to know. So I want to know, Joel wants to know your story. I'm going to share one more quick story because I have 5 minutes. I'm going to share a story about Joel that I wasn't planning on sharing. I just thought of this, and Joel sat down, and if you sit down with us, I'm going to prepare you now. Because in the meeting, the very first meeting, not the very first, we'll do a 15-minute phone call probably, then we'll set up a meeting if it makes sense to go to the next step. If it doesn't, we'll part ways knowing that we couldn't help each other. But if it makes sense, one of the things that we're going to ask you is to understand what your story is. And so when I first sat down with Joel, I said, Joel, the most important part is people's story. He's like, yeah, I know. I'm like, no. I'm being dead serious. I want to know what it is that is the most important to them. When we create plans, you're going to find none of them are the same because nobody's story is the same. So Joel started to share his story with me. And we went deeper into his story. And folks, this is not a psychology experiment, and we're not going to sit and be psychologists, but we want to know what's important to you. And so after a few minutes, Joel stopped and he told me about a trip to Australia. And he said, my wife and I, Kelsey, have always wanted to go to Australia, and we want to be in Australia, so much so that we named our first daughter Sydney. So I got down and in sharing with Joel, one of the most important things that he shared with me was Sydney and his kids and his family and doing fun stuff together. And that's what we want to hear from you. What is it that is most important to you, and what are you trying to achieve? Because we're just fortunate enough to be able to help you with your money. It's not our money, but we're here to help you, and we want to do it the same way you would like it done. And we want to do it in a way that is congruent with your story and what's important to you. Because to me, that's the most important part. If we take care of your money, if we understand your goals, if we set your life up for greatness, you will go on and do greatness because you won't have to worry about money. So I want to hear what's important to you, and so does Joel. Next thing we got to know is if we can help. We're not for everybody, okay? And we don't take everybody, because if people don't want to share their story, if they don't want to get involved, if they don't want to be coached, they're not for us, right? If you want to do it yourself, then do it yourself. If you want me to help you set it up for yourself, I can do some of that for you as well. So can Joel. But if we can help and you want help, it's got to be reciprocal. And I often kid, you can't be a pain in the butt. We don't want to work with people who are going to be a pain in the butt because there's too much good stuff going on. So I don't think any of you are on this webinar, but just in case you are, we want you to come to us, share your story, and we want to be of service and be able to help. And we also know it's an honor to help you. It's not anything but that. And that's the way that I view it. And that's the way that we view it. And the last thing, yes, is if you want our help. So 3 very, very important things. With that being said, we've covered quite a few things. Ensure you have enough income. We want to protect yourself from any unnecessary risks. And the third thing we want to do is reduce the effect of taxes. And that's going to be a big one in the future. So with that, I'm not sure I ever figured out the chat box. And for that, I sincerely apologize.
We're getting better, John. We're getting better with this technology.
Yes. Thank you. We are getting better. So in conclusion, what I would say is give us a call. You can find, you're probably like, well, how do I call you? You can log into the Navin Group. And then what you can do is look on the website. You'll find access to our calendars. So you can click a link and it'll take us right to our calendars. The other thing you're going to find is that either Joel or myself will give you a call tomorrow just to touch base. I want to hear your feedback because this is new for us. I want to know if you liked it, didn't like it, what you liked about it, and what you thought was terrible. And I'm open to listening to all of them because I want to make this a better experience for everybody. And then the other thing is, if you're interested in getting together and you want to talk about it, we'll set up a time to talk for 15 minutes, ask each other a few questions, and see where we go from there. So with that, I want to thank you. We're out in 45 minutes, and go conquer your world.
Take care, everybody.
Cheers.